My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piransia Sangran, Guru Piranyo, fellow Nyanis. Today I'm going to continue from the last time I left you all with this chapter 30 of Mahan on human beings, humans or man. When they mean man, it means man and women. So in this case, humans, right? And we as a species are called Homo sapiens. And in the last time, I spoke about how we as a species have, developed over the many hundreds of thousands of years. Evolution to some extent helped us. And if you see the earlier YouTube clips, we show the evolution of all the species and how we as a species evolved from the different types of early humans right up to more modern human beings. And here, the evolution saw us cross-pollinate and eventually emerge what we call the Homo sapiens, which the thinking man, and over the many years, we developed many things, and part of it is that nature helped us, and nurture too. A lot of things that we did also helped us. And the last time I spoke about the difference between human brain and the animal brain, and the human beings went on to develop, the brain continue to evolve. So do all the species. There's an evolution, but the human species evolved at such a level that it is able to create, various complex things. So from very rudimentary to more complex modern human beings. And I spoke about this, that, part of our brains developed, and we see that part of our, frontal lobe started evolving because of the circumstances and the environment that we as a species were. We had to now fight with all the other species for the limited food. So nature helped us evolve, our brains to evolve to be able to develop rapidly. So we saw that, our concentration, our planning, our problem solving, all this continuously developed as our brain started evolving. And I covered this in the last time that, we as a species over the many years developed language, developed mathematics, and went on to develop many things. So we were able to pass on knowledge across different generations. So we as a species have become very dominant. And we dominate pretty much most of the earth at the expense of all the other species. Now come back to how intelligent or how progressive we as a species have been. Does it mean that because we have language, different languages, different dialects, do other species have language? Yes, they do have their own medium of communication. The bees have their own medium of communication through various vibrations. So do the bats, and every species have their own way of communicating to themselves. And if you see the ants is really amazing. You see when two ants come together, they join, and then they move on. So it's their way of passing information. So different species have different ways of passing information. So today I want to focus on human beings. Many scriptures have said that the human life is the most advanced life, and I want to see whether that's true. Are we the most evolved? Now, what do we mean by most evolved? Right? Is it because we are thinking? Does that give us the right to say we are the most evolved? Right. So again, Mahans and other great saints, ask this question. Are there more evolved species? And if we as a human being evolved, then we should be continuously improving our quality of life. And have we improved the quality of our lives? So how have we done as a species? So this is the question I want to ask. You see, so I always ask this question that we have many advancement, as a species, and we started off at the. If you go to the YouTube 16, I covered a little bit of this. I'm recapping this, and we had of course, we were like all other animals fighting, and for food and procreation and whole thing. And then over time, we evolved. We became nomads. Nomads means we go to where places food is there, we consume everything, and then once the food run out, we move to a different place. And you see that every time we move, we see that we are confronted with other animal species, other tribes. There's a lot of conflicts. And over time, we evolved and we developed, a better, more sustainable way of looking after the species. So we had barter trade, specialization, and then we started, developing our own language, mathematics, philosophy. We started developing science, technology, innovation. And over time, we then started reflecting back and started thinking, okay, we've learned all this. How do we put this, so that we pass it on to the next generation? This is where you see scriptures, wisdom, knowledge, understanding nature, the forces of nature. So we as a species started developing higher order thinking. But with all that, we as a species really developed. And if you see very clearly, while we have developed, we have a lot of modernity, modern science, technology, and so on. Unfortunately, if you see, if you look around, have we actually evolved as a species? The answer is not really. And I'll come back to, there are areas that we have made a lot of progress, but a lot of our knowledge and technology also has caused so much challenges for not just for us, but all other species, including Mother Earth. So with all the developments and industrial development, we have massive pollution. We dump a lot of garbage and contaminants in our rivers. We know it is bad, but yet we do it. We have a lot of plastic waste. We have a lot of industrial waste. So the question we want to ask is that, are we an intelligent species? Should we know that if we harm nature, it is going to come back to us? So with all the modernity, this wisdom somehow is not gaining traction in humanity. So we see that pollution is very rampant. Malaysia faces, a lot of haze. Many countries face this. Nature has blessed us with so much greenery, yet, we destroy this through deforestation. So these forests are our lungs, and we see that we destroy them in the name of development, creating more space for people to live, more buildings, more roads. So nature is giving up its forests for the development of humanity. We see a lot of plastics. We see plastics are modern development, yet we see that plastic contamination. We're starting to see a lot of microplastics now seep into the waterway, into the human body, into many, many species have microplastics that is having an impact on the health of the humans. So are we really smart? Do we have the wisdom? And what do great saints and sages speak about this, right? We see, because of this, we see a lot of natural disaster. When we get rid of the forest, the water, there's no protection of water. Water rushes in. You have, flash floods, landslide. We also have global warming that is causing drought, forest fire. All this is because of our human activity. So the question I have is that, how intelligent are we? If we are intelligent, we should know that the symbiotic relationship between the health of the planet and the health of the people are intricately tied together. How is it that we don't see it, right? So all this leads to, the pollution. And the other thing is that we also, in the forest, we encroach into other animals' homes, and we take away their land, we take away, so we lose the biodiversity. And worse still is that when we encroach into other animals' habitat, the animals may be carrying bacteria and viruses that they are immune to, but we are not immune. So when we come in contact with them, that viruses jump in us, we don't have immunity, and we have the prevalence of what we call zoonotic diseases. So we see that the viruses jump, from live animals, go into the markets, and we eat it, it impacts us. We do wild hunting, we come in this, deer, wild boar, bats, gorillas. We see that a lot of the viruses jump into our system. The same thing you see, we have wild farming, domestic animals, you see that a lot of domestic animals get infected. And we use those domestic animals, we eat them, we drink their milk. So we see that our human activity of pollution, our human activities of contamination, our human activity of having a lot of fossil fuels that is causing global warming, temperature changes. When temperature changes, the viruses change. You got a lot of heat in many places, very hot, people are dying. In other places, you have very cold, people are dying. You see a lot of rain, floods. You see recently there's a lot of floods, people are dying. We also see this, tremendous drought that, wipes out, uh, you know, uh, food systems, disrupts food systems. You have starvation, famine. All this is tied to human activity of contamination, pollution, causing climate change and global warming. So these zoonotic diseases also are tied to the changes in the temperature. When changes in the temperature takes place, we see that the viruses start mutating. And one such virus is COVID. The COVID is actually a zoonotic disease that scientists believe is due to the changes in the climate, changes in the environment, and obviously it was happening in the jungle. Somebody went out there to hunt or farm or whatever, and those viruses jump onto the human system and they come back home, pass it on to their wives and children and people in the market, and we saw millions of that. So the question I have is, with all the modernity and all the technology, are we as a species progress? Are we a progressive species? And you'll see that this article in Frontiers in Veterinary Science shows how human activity is having an impact on the health of the planet and the health of the people. So this is another important study that showed that prior to the Industrial Revolution, our pollution level is very low. In 1945, just after the war, you see that the number of natural disaster, and the health, the number of natural disaster because of climate change, climate-related disasters have doubled. So in 1945, it was less than 30, 35. But over time, we see that as we pollute the environment, as industrial pollution takes place, as we cause greenhouse effect, global warming, we see that we have, when the temperature goes up, you see that the earth traps many pollutants, and you see that a lot of pollutants in the air. You see asthma going up, you see non-communicable diseases, heart disease. All these are related, and we are starting to see a lot more earthquakes. We're drilling too much oil, and that's changing the dynamics of the tectonic plates, and you see a lot more earthquakes. So from 1945 to 2020, human activity has seen an increase of almost, before 1945, less than 30 natural disasters. But today, per year, we have 412 natural disasters, right, during the period from 2010 to 2020. This is cyclones, flooding, causing a lot of hardship. So In spite of all the developments, modernity, knowledge, we as a species have actually caused more harm to nature than any other species in the world. So we have degraded the health of the planet, and we have degraded the health of the people and all other biological beings. So people like Swamiji and others ask this question, and if you see in Swamiji, he says, we have to live with nature. We have to live in harmony with nature. If we go in, contrary to nature, it is only going to come and harm us. So I asked this question of this modern man, the modernity does not lead to progressive development. That requires this whole notion of, human beings are so self-centered. All they think about is return on investment. How much return do I get for my investment? And sometimes we compromise on the quality and its impact on people. So you'll see that, great saints and sages don't talk about profit or return on investment, but they talk about the values and the return on values that we have for ourselves and the societies that we live in. And that values-based development is what we call spiritual development. It is tied to a greater cause. And the greater cause is that to really appreciate life, appreciate nature, appreciate the environment that we live in, and treat it as Mother Nature, truly Mother Nature, to look after it so that it looks after us. And that's what the spiritual teachings are. And this is quite well, spoken about by many, many people. So we want to ask this question: with all the progress we have made as a species, are we progressive? Right? As man, we say we are thinking man, we are modern man, we are highly developed, really. So are we jeopardizing our existence? And as we prolong, as temperatures increase, there will be a period where, we will, a lot of the insects will die. We will not have cross-pollination of plants. You'll see vegetables. We will have shortage of vegetables, fruits, edible things. When our oceans run out of fish, we see that we lose that protein sources. When we lose grass and all the things, we see that our farm animals will struggle. There'll be starvation. When they die off, we'll see that our food system starts declining. When our food system starts declining, and our water systems get contaminated, when the temperature goes up, we see a lot of evaporation of our lakes and rivers, and we see that we are unable to drink salt water, right? And so we have shortage of water, shortage of food, and you start seeing conflicts, countries fighting. War causes a lot more damage. And given that many superpowers have nuclear, if any one of them releases the nuclear, it just, will expedite the existence of humanity. In the same way, we see that all this, food systems being disrupted, lack of good drinking water, poor air qualities, all this eventually will start leading to the disappearance or the extinction of human species. So the question I have is, how smart are we, right? In terms of all the modern technology and knowledge, why is it that the earth is in the current state? So is there a better way of life we as a species need to cultivate? And you'll see that I want you to think about, what do we mean by spiritual life? Spiritual life means to live in harmony with nature. Nature itself is called to our being and our spirit. And how do we value add nature and all nature's creation? And this is what in the next satsang I'll speak about, that we as a human beings, have evolved and developed new knowledge systems, new technology, and all those things. But that doesn't mean that we have become more wiser. As a matter of fact, we have become more and more, materially, caught up with our materiality. We have lost its spiritual values the nature-centric values. And this is why society today is struggling. Pollution, global warming, temperature, all these have an impact on the health and well-being of all species. Ultimately, it'll come back to impacting humanity itself. So here are some nice quotes by great people that talk about the symbiotic relationship between nature and man. And I want you to think about this really carefully, because in the next class I'll talk about how do we weave that spiritual values to create this more modern, nature-centric human being. And this is crucial for the survival of us as a species. So here he says that man and nature must work hand in hand. This is by Franklin D. Roosevelt. He says, throwing out of balance of the resources of nature. When we throw nature out of balance, we will be out of balance. So we are closely tied to nature. And I think this is something that we need to really appreciate, that we need to make sure that each one of us, understand this intricate relationship. And when we contaminate at the micro level, our rivers, throw garbage, throw plastic, are not sustainable. If each one of us are not sustainable, can you imagine 34 million people in Malaysia are doing the same thing, the amount of contamination that we cause? Far less 7 billion human beings that do this, right? So there'll be a state where nature just cannot take. If we do not reboot our system, nature will boot us out of the ecosystem. So again, we see that. And finally, we see that, this is another nice quote, that man not only survives and functions in his environment, so we function in an environment and we shape the environment, and it shapes us. And this has got a very loaded statement. Nature is very important for the, the life of every species, including human beings. And we are a dominant force in nature that is shaping that environment. If we shape it in a good way, the benefits we get. But if we shape it in a negative way, also the epicenter of the negativity comes back and haunts us. So again, we have to be very, very careful as a species that how do we spiritualize our life? There's no point doing ritualistic things, but still harming nature. It has to be core to the way of our life. Spirituality is our way of life, that we divinize everything. We spiritualize everything. And it starts off with spiritualizing and divinizing nature itself, the forces of nature, and ensure that whatever we do doesn't harm Mother Nature, at least in a small way in our own lives, in our family, in our communities, in the countries that we live, and as a global citizen. If all of us can do that, I think we'll be able to turn around the downward spiral that is happening in nature itself. And this is what Swamiji speaks about. We as a species have a moral responsibility to look after nature. If we don't, and we don't look after all the creation through our own action, we'll see that at the end of this, we will get the brunt of poorer quality of life, including disease, death, and extinction of our species. Sandosham.